Salutation Shades, and welcome back to your one-stop shop for all things strange and unusual, talking with shadows. The conversation everyone has, but no one wants to admit to. Here with your host, Vic Whaley.
And a very frustrated Marcus D. Holy Christ!
We've been trying to record for a full hour now, just haunted and harried by technical difficulties.
Oh my God, I have invented so many new expletives this afternoon that would get us kicked off of YouTube. But we are here. We are recording the episode. We are super excited. And on top of that, we are also on video for all of our patrons, by the way.
No live this time.
Yes,
after
no live.
last video when we said we were, and then we realized afterwards we did not hit record on the camera.
Look at it now. Red light on our audio recording that's going on. Recording on our programming right here. You can see us waving over here, so it's going great. Hello, Shades. Welcome. Thank you. Welcome, patrons. And a big shout out to our newest patron, by the way, Jesse. Yes, we are so excited to finally came around and join the cool club.
I highly suspect I might know which Jesse this is.
Oh, 100%. And all I got to say is it's about time, Jesse. How long have we been supporting your endeavors? You just now became a patron. You're the only patron we're going to get mad at for the time.
Apparently, this is how we treat our patrons. Yes. You get badgered.
Yes. All of our other patrons, we are glad you were able to join whenever it was convenient for you. Jesse, you should have done it a long time ago. Just so you know. Oh, but we are back, guys, for part 2 of our exploration of the Mothman timeline surrounding the Silver Bridge collapse. If you didn't check out our last episode, I would definitely go back to that episode, as we covered a lot of the events of the Mothman leading up to the Silver Bridge collapse, and we ended up about at the end of November of 1966.
Oh yeah, we'll be starting in early December now. But do you want to do some comments?
I do. So from our last episode, Dino Benton said, I'd say Nessie, but then Monster Quest touted the idea of having it having died so Bigfoot keeps the throne. Chupacabra and Mothman feel like they're close enough. Also, in regards to distance for the Mothman, what if there was more than one? In regards to the Condor,
oh my God!
By the way, where if you're also joining us for this first time for this episode, welcome to our second meeting of Fat American Condors Anonymous.
Okay, I really just misguessed how much a California condor weighs by a factor of 10.
Yeah. So, like, Vic considered the condor was probably like the size of the dragon from the Dungeons and Dragons movie, like that chunky dragon from that movie.
They're apparently much smaller than I thought they were in my head. I think I have I think I maybe watched that Rescuers Down Under movie when I was a little kid. And like that giant bird snuck into my head and went into the California condor file or something. Because I was thinking it was like that big or something.
So you thought the California condor was the bird from the Rescuers Down Under that takes place in Australia?
No. I think that bird snuck over into my brain's California condor file and
okay.
just was hanging out there, skewing the size category on it or something.
Donald Benton also said we should check out the Andean condor, though that's a big boy. And I pulled up some photos of it, and that looks like a turkey that will F your life up. Like that. That is a big effing bird. I almost swore. It looks like a villain in an upcoming Disney movie. like it's just gonna be the bad guy that just messes with some kids.
But back to that idea of there being multiple, I actually think that makes a good degree of sense. But it's like, when it comes to the Mothman, it's just very hard to figure out anything about it. I don't think, like, it makes biological sense, so it's hard to think of it as having a biological family, but it does seem to be organic, so maybe it does?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just such a complicated subject matter.
Gotcha. Aries Blue Steel says a 200-pound bird would need a 23 to 30-foot wingspan to be able to fly, absolutely dwarfing any current living flying bird. Birds are built to be as lightweight as possible, so even the biggest currently living flying birds weigh about as much as a toddler, even though they even have hollow bones to reduce its weight of their skeletons.
Yeah, I knew about the whole hollow bones thing. But like when you're applying like the science of flight to any flying humanoid encounter, not just the Mothman, the numbers just aren't there. You can't make it make sense. The wingspans are wrong. The weight ratios are wrong.
Well, that would mean that if it's actually light enough that it could fly, then I don't know why people are that terrified of it. Because if it's the weighs about as much as a toddler, like that means a toddler could take the Mothman.
Well, okay, that doesn't necessarily follow, but I see what you're saying here.
Like now that's what I want to see now: toddler versus Mothman.
Instead of blood, the Mothman has helium that carries like all of its vital goos. I don't know. I got it now. Like it's instead of like having these predatory like red glowing eyes because it's some supernatural creature, it's just red because it's high all the time because it's huff and helium to make it light. Gives me a planes, trains, and automobiles reference from John Caddy. Like it's filled with helium, so it's very light. The little links and whatnot. It's been a very long time since I've seen
Armstrong
that movie.
Moon Rings. It's a great movie. Jay the Phoenix says, putting it briefly, flying is anatomically expensive. Mothman would likely to have hollow bones for its weight, and I believe oxygen transfer. Mothman may not hold parts of organs as seen in people. Hashtag Mothman has one nut is the best hashtag, by the way, that I have ever seen.
And I love it when people put like terms like biologically expensive in there, because a lot of it, that's what it comes down to. We talked about this some when we were talking about like bat squatch. The caloric cost of a creature like that being able to fly would be insane. Like the human brain, it only works because it's so damn effective, because it eats a ton of our caloric intake just to make that organ run the way it does.
Well, you don't think that maybe the fact that it just only has one testicle might reduce the calorie intake that it needs to survive?
By a little bit. I mean, it makes sense if you're going to cut corners for weight, sure.
I mean, I don't know. I have both of them. I don't know what it's like to live that way, so I don't know what the caloric exchange rate
let me put it this way. I don't think losing a nut's going to make me fly. I really doubt that.
Also, so we want to be clear that we are not endorsing that in any way, shape, or form. Like,
wait, how do we get on, like, do we or don't we endorse body, like, removal? I don't even know what to say.
I blame Jay. I blame Jay the Phoenix. Jay knows what they did. Hashtag Mothman has one nut.
Love it.
I want that to go viral. That's just great. And I think on that nut, we can now move on to the next part of the timeline of the events.
Okay, last time we left off, it was late November. We were tracking Mothman's movements, kind of keeping in this circular pattern around the area of Point Pleasant, and occasionally just kind of dipping into the city to spook some peoples. Mm-hmm. We're going to go a bit of a ways into this, and then we have a really interesting theory we're wanting to pitch to you guys, but we'll get to that here in a second. We're going to pick back up in December. There have been a few more Mothman encounters in the intervening time, but they've been more sporadic. The next major one comes December 4th, 1966. Mothman was reportedly seen near the town of Ravenswood, West Virginia, located about 30 miles south of Point Pleasant. Mm-hmm. So once again, it's following that pattern of the Mothman kind of appears in the Point Pleasant area, the TNT area, spooks some people, but then for some reason, once again, withdraws. Mm-hmm. This time heading south.
Now, one of the things I think that we also need to understand here during this timeline is this is about the time that John Keel, we know that by this time John Keel has now come to Point Pleasant and he's interviewing individuals regarding the Mothman, correct?
Yes, he arrived in early November?
Yeah, November.
Yeah.
So we're in December. So now for a fact, we do know that at this point, people in the town are starting to talk about it. John Keel is going around and interviewing people during this time.
Actually, Keel brings up something very interesting in Mothman Prophecies. It's actually at the very start of the book where Keel talks about him checking out these rumors of men showing up in dark suits on like lonely roads and coming up to houses and knocking and asking for seemingly simple things. Their mannerisms were strange for the area, but the end of the joke is it's Keel. It's Keel because his car broke down and he had to like go and like ask random people out in the middle of the sticks for like help with his car, and end up generating like a mini rumor about him.
Like, I immediately was thinking, like, jumping to some of the stories we did in a previous episode. Like, it was in, I think it was in New York whenever we were talking about that, of, like, these Men in Black-esque scenarios where these just strange people that were just showing up on your doorstep. And Keel is literally contributing
oh, no, like,
now,
in the book, he definitely spins it that sort of way for the joke just to be, it was me.
Like, you gotta love somebody who has a sense of humor about this whole thing.
Okay, next sighting. December 8th, 1966. Several residents of Point Pleasant reportedly received strange phone calls. These unusual calls warned them about an impending disaster and mentioned the Mothman. These calls caused fear and anxiety within the community. Mm-hmm. Now, you probably are at least somewhat familiar with these calls, are you?
Yeah, you're talking about like people just calling up saying something bad's about. You're talking like the men, like comparing it to like men.
Yeah, like
black
the strange, like some of them were distorted. Some of them gave very unusual names.
Now was that to just random townsfolk, or was that to Keel himself?
I believe Keel did receive some himself, but for the most part, Keel was documenting it occurring to other people within the town.
Right.
If I remember right, one of them even introduced himself as like Mr. UFO.
Uh-huh.
And some of them claimed to know Keel or other reporters. Right. But they were hinting about this impending disaster. That's what really sticks out to me because we all know what's coming. We're not to it yet, but all you guys listening at home, I assume, know what we're building to.
Well, yeah. Well, one of the things I think I have an idea possibly for like Keel getting some of these phone calls. Now, random people in the community, depending upon who they are. I mean, let's keep in mind, we're all talking about like the 1960s where we have like land. Now, I know many people today don't remember the times in which we had landline phones, but like it wasn't super table and common if somebody knew your cell phone, like phone number, where they wouldn't call you just to mess with you. Now, keep in mind, Keel is showing up around this time, and he's asking some people in the town personal questions, throwing up stuff, and I imagine that there probably are going to be some people in the community not super excited that some stranger from outside the town is now showing up and asking a bunch of really weird questions.
Oh, yeah, people, although Keel was generally liked by the people in the community, there definitely were people who didn't want Keel.
Yeah, I mean, it just takes one person just to not like you, and then just a few of their cronies.
Yeah, but, like, the idea that, like, it's calling up a lot of random people, and Keel does go into some of these in the book, where people are just getting these weird phone calls, some of them distorted, some of them not sounding right, some of them not even really making much sense.
Correct.
And just hinting at there being this impending disaster right before a real disaster occurs.
No. I want to know the people in the now. I don't have an explanation for. I don't have an explanation for like the people that are receiving some of these phone calls. Keel, I get, because keep in mind we're talking like the 1960s. You have civil rights activists that also got threatening phone calls to people. You know, whenever they show up in a town and they're like, you need to get out, otherwise something bad's going to happen, like some sort of impending threat. But like the people themselves. Because again, this time people don't know something's going to happen. You know that we're leading up to the Silver Bridge collapse.
But okay, so people associate Mothman with this prophetic force,
correct?
And we have these prophetic calls going out, although they're generally pretty ill-specific.
Correct.
How do we combine these two ideas? Is the Mothman grabbing a phone and making these calls? Is this some sort of telepathic pulse that's being picked up by the airways and manifesting in a way we understand? Is this a separate prophetic force occurring within this town? Like I really want to understand this part of the phenomena, but it's very hard when you really think about it to dissect.
Okay. If I'm putting on my believer hat, it's not that hard in this particular situation. One of the things that I also think that I do believe in, I do believe in psychic phenomena. I really 100% do believe And if you have an individual that is prone to having like some of these possible like prophetic visions, that may be something that's going on, is they're just diving into whatever their instincts are telling them to do to make a call like something bad is about to happen.
So are you saying that like there may have been someone in the town who was prophetic and was just kind of reaching out, scattershot, calling people with this vague warning,
or even outside the town? I mean, it could be even be outside of the town itself too. That just felt like some psychics. When you listen to some people, they'll just say that they were just driven to do something. Like they don't even know why.
There was that. I didn't research this before because I didn't know what we were talking about. But there was that famous airplane crash where a bunch of random people had these psychic visions that this plane was going to crash,
right?
And called in the authorities, and they ended up getting investigated because, well, if I'm like, hey, this plane with this number is going to crash, and then it crashes, the authorities are going to think I had something to do with it,
right? And, you know, and that may have been something that may have been driving people to do that. I mean...
Oh, yeah, the people who called in, their big thing was, like, I just felt compelled I had to tell someone. I didn't know how I knew this crash was going to occur, but I knew that it was going to happen, and I'm responsible for getting this word out.
Yeah. Like, I think people inherently, not inherently, I think people... civilized individuals have this compulsion of wanting to help people.
Oh, I think it's inherent. I think that's part of being a social creature.
Well, no, I think that we're generally born selfish. We learn to care about others.
How very Hobbesian are you? Now that's an obscure philosophy reference right there.
Anybody that has a child knows you have to teach that into people to
life
share.
Is short, petty, and brutish.
Like
if anyone's getting these Hobbes references, please comment, because probably no one's getting them but me.
I'm not saying it's that deep, but I'm saying like where we learn to, but that's instilled into people, the sense of wanting. That's a learned behavior, regardless if it's inherent or it's learned. It doesn't really matter. You just have
it's
this
a learned behavior,
drive.
Regardless if it's inherent or
no.
learned.
It's you either if it's inherently you have this desire to help people, or you've picked up this trait. You have said trait. And
I would say it's not inherent in everyone, but I think in social creatures there's a trend. Is probably how I should have said it.
And because you have that trait, you're going to have people that just get this compelled of, I need to do something. Yeah. And if you knew something bad was going to happen, you're going to be driven to warn people. Yeah. And so...
100%.
Yeah, so if I was going to make a guess as to what could cause that, that's going to be my guess. I've never heard people talk about this kind of phenomena, but I would believe it.
I've only heard it in a few cases, and in many of those, it's people being like... In some of them were people who aren't normally psychic. They're just like, hey, I knew this, I just had to get it out, because I didn't want people to die. And I felt if they died and I didn't say something, it's on me.
Because Keel getting these phone calls and people getting these calls reminds me vaguely of, like, the Zodiac killer phenomenon. Like, the reporter that was investigating that got random strange phone calls, including also people, like, associated with the whole thing also got bizarre phone calls, too.
Was this, like, because this I don't know that much about, is this, like, strange phone calls as, like, hey, I'm a random person, here's what I think happened?
No, like, it's, like, heavy breathing, distorted phone calls and things like that, too. So I think that's something people forget has happened as we have moved away from landline phones into cell phones.
Wait, are you telling me, on air, not quite live, that the Mothman was a Zodiac killer?
I mean, we don't know who the Zodiac killer was. I'm just saying. Now, granted, I think people have survived it. No, they doesn't have wings. So, no, I'm going to exonerate the Mothman and say, no, the Mothman is not the Zodiac killer.
Okay, you're officially coming out, exonerating the Mothman
right.
as not being the Zodiac killer.
But I just meant, like, what this phenomenon was. I mean, I think they can make an argument for the skeptic case, or it could even make an argument for the believer case.
I don't know. I think it's really fascinating. I think this is one of those things that's at the crux of the Mothman phenomena. And what makes it so interesting is I can't quite get my head around it. Like, and part of me ties it in with some of the strange stuff going on simultaneously with Woodrow Derenberger during this time period, where he's getting, like, these visits from Indrid Cold, and he's getting these psychic visions from Indrid Cold, but also, like, okay, tell me if you've studied the whole Woodrow thing, right?
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention because I had another thought that just came up tying back to the phone call.
Oh, what you got?
Have you ever noticed that as time has progressed, we move towards cell phones, you see less of that particular phenomenon of the random strange phone calls that people get, like, with the phone?
I mean, Probably. I guess I haven't found a lot of cases where it comes up modernly. So yeah, and I guess it must be falling off.
Like even other like Mothman phenomenon, like say like with Fukushima, 9/11, these other sorts types of instances, you don't really see these popping up as compared to say like Point Pleasant, Chernobyl.
But it's also like not uncommon for like there not to be a major Mothman event for a few decades at a time.
Sure.
So we could just be in a dry spell right now.
True, but Chernobyl happened in the 80 early 80s. I'm not gonna look it up right now, but after Point Pleasant.
Yeah.
And you had a similar phenomenon with the phone call with the random threatening phone call things. But as cell phones have come out and we've even had Mothman sightings with that, you don't get the weird strange phone calls. I'm not saying that to me, I was curious as to the reason about why that's the case, but it seems like there's a change in the phenomenon. Like we talked about in the Pillow Talk segment with the Hat Man.
Yeah.
You know, there's been a resurgence of sightings of him in the 2020s, and now he's got like white eyes or white glowing eyes, which is weird pre that.
Okay. Kind of a two-part question.
Sure.
The most recent big Mothman flap, and correct me if I'm wrong, was the Gary, Indiana one.
Yes, in the early two. Well, I mean, like whether or not it was a Mothman or was a wing.
That was my next question. Was going to be: Do you classify this like more like Mothman, or maybe something more like the NASA gargoyle?
Like that's more like a NASA. Like if you're to like the very last, like you would tie the Mothman to something was the Fukushima disaster.
Okay, so you wouldn't really count the like what happened in Gary, Indiana, to be part of it.
No.
Okay.
No. I think that's a similar like we see a winged humanoid. But it's not, and I think
that's fair.
Like,
I think that's a fair enough. So like it was a winged humanoid, dark colored,
right?
But it didn't do a lot of Mothman-y stuff. So,
but then again, people talk about the Mothman all the time, and they usually associate with disasters. But again, we talk about that that there are very similarly eerily these winged humanoid sightings that don't necessarily coincide. Like, we're from Indiana, so Gary, Indiana itself is a natural disaster.
Yeah,
but
the natural disaster
being from
Gary,
Indiana, I think we could say that. I mean, it
is a rough place, guys. Don't.
I'm like,
if you have a chance to go there or go around it, maybe just go around.
Can't go over it. Can't go under it. I'm going through. I'm going around it.
That's probably your smart choice when it comes down to it.
I just
really feel like there's a missing piece here, and it's a very crucial piece of the puzzle.
With the phone calls?
I think the phone calls
right.
fit into the greater pattern of the mystery of the Mothman, but we've never been able to really get a good sense of the why of it. And I think if we could figure that out, we would be a lot closer. Because that's a big part of the prophetic angle.
I really want to believe that there's psychic phenomena, but you can easily believe at the same time that there are people that are threatening individuals in the town because you have some reporter type individuals showing up.
Yeah.
Wanting to. It only takes a couple bad apples for something like that to happen.
I don't know. It's like so close to the Silver City disaster. And
sure.
They're calling and talking about this disaster's about to happen.
Yeah, because you're leaving it vague as to what type of threat that it could be.
Yeah, but it's so close on the timeline.
Yeah, but even if you listen to people
we're
that
talking, like 6 days now?
True. I'm not saying that there are bizarre coincidences. I'm not saying that it's not eerily coincidental.
That's fair. I guess it could be just people making these vague threats, just kind of how people do.
Right.
And it just happened to line up well with it,
right.
But at the same time, it's kind of hard for me to write it off.
But comparing it to the Chernobyl disaster, there's really no reason to believe that just random people are just going to get threatening phone calls for no real random reason during that time.
Yeah.
So, that's going along with that, too.
I kind of forgot that there were threatening calls with the Chernobyl disaster.
Exactly. And there wasn't a random person. Granted, you're in not a very nice part of the world, but I just don't think that you're going to be receiving a random call for zero reason leading up to the Chernobyl disaster.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, you ready to move on?
Sure.
December 9th, 1966, the Mothman was reportedly seen near the town of St. Albans, West Virginia, located 30 miles northeast of Point Pleasant.
Okay.
So, similar to last month, we have the Mothman going south, then kind of returning to the area, and then going north again. Actually, really early in November, there was some stuff north. Right. And some of it even pre-existed some of the Point Pleasant stuff. Right. But once again, we have the Mothman making this weird circuit for God knows why. December 10th. Another very simple sighting within the Point Pleasant area, and then it kind of dies down for a while until the 15th.
Correct.
And what happens on the 15th?
We have the Silver Bridge collapse.
And for some reason, I had in my notes that it was on the 10th, and I'm glad that you corrected me, like right before that. I have no clue why I put that date down wrong. But that's when the bridge collapses. That's where everything goes down. We checked to see if Keel was in town at the time. It turns out he was. But, okay. How do we, now that we have a timeline established up to the bridge, before we move on to like some of the stuff that you're wanting to talk about, how do we rectify this information? We have a strange entity. It's appearing mainly around this town and occasionally in this kind of circling motion, usually going south then north.
Correct.
We have these strange phone calls in the town. We have the whole Darren Berger thing where he's getting these messages from, and I know we didn't cover a lot of it, but we've covered it on previous episodes, where he's getting these messages from Indrid Cold.
Right. Well, the first thing that I'm gonna say is I don't think that the Mothman caused the bridge to collapse. Okay. I know that there are some individuals that like to say the Mothman causes some of these particular types of problems. I mean, one of the reason why the bridge collapses is it's one of those, I can never remember pronounce, but where the vertical part of the bridge meets the top rope, kind of like where it tees.
Yeah.
There's kind of like there's a circular ball bearing that goes in so it can move. And one of the things that they found from that was the one that broke was defective. And that they had found evidence of corrosion that had been building up over time where water had gotten in that caused it to crack. And
what about the idea that Mothman is an agent of, like, entropy?
That it just rapidly caused that to happen?
We're talking about something mystically, so I'm not going to, like, be able to scientifically break it down for you. like, I don't know what a intrepidtic aura would look like. I couldn't even
like the Mothman's just gonna put like a natural corrosive thing that's gonna look like something that corroded for like 30 something years. And
I've heard
rather
of a few,
than it just snapping.
I've heard a few kind of fringe theories on. One is that the Mothman is just this creature that's an agent of entropy. That where the Mothman is going to be, things are just going to break down, corrode, and go back to base form at an unnatural rate. Another one I've heard is that, and this is kind of in a similar vein, that it's a kind of living omen of bad fate. That wherever it's going to be, things bad will naturally happen. And then I've kind of heard of a more fringe one that, like, it's just in there chewing on stuff. And I think that sounds very unlikely in this situation, but I want to voice all the dissenting opinions I'm aware of.
Well, I would say that it just seems very bizarre for the Mothman to fly over there and then create an effect of something that would take 30-something years for it to do.
I mean, I'm not
rather
defending
than it just
this.
snapping.
Like the thing is, like, I couldn't really give any real defense to this because physics wise, it doesn't really make sense.
Right.
It's more of this very kind of fringe mystical interpretation, but I did want to give it to you.
Compared to, because also at the time there were other similar bridges that were manufactured around 1928, up in Pittsburgh. You have the Three Sisters bridges that are up there that are built in the same fashion as the Mothman. As the Silver Bridge, except for the fact that these rungs, these ball joints, are further spaced apart in the Silver City Bridge, which made it much easier for when one broke, the rest of them broke.
So this was kind of an engineering error on placement.
Right, correct. And was the main reason why the Three Sisters bridges up in Pittsburgh that were designed in a similar fashion, but where there were more of these support beams that were set up were kept, and then I think it was the Carpenter Bridge, which was along the river as well, which was built similar to the Silver Bridge, was closed. And they demolished it shortly thereafter.
Did it have some of the same design flaws?
Yes, I believe it had some of the. Well, they were concerned. They were concerned if one broke, that the rest of them would end up breaking, and it wouldn't be able to support it.
Yeah.
I don't. In truth, well, actually, I think in all fairness, I don't think they actually investigated the bridge. I think some people even think that particular bridge was taken down too quickly. There's some people that throw that out there as well. So I don't want to fully say that it was. It wasn't. It was built similarly, but who knows whether or not
that it might have been taken down due to reactionary beliefs.
Whether or not there was any reason to believe that any of them were defective, like the Silver Bridge was.
So, if we're not thinking that Mothman is the cause, which I wasn't trying to make the argument that that's what I actually believe, I guess it leaves us kind of with maybe two other major possibilities. At least that's coming across my head. One being that it's a coincidental appearance, and the other one being that maybe it's drawn to fate. Like, it's drawn to these native things, which that is the one I personally do believe. I think it's like a black shuck.
So then let me ask you a question. As compared to, say, the black shuck, as compared to, say, the Mothman, because these are two very different entities of fate, okay? The black shuck showing up, like, if you're about to die or possibly one of these, but the Mothman showing up around major disasters.
Yes.
If we're under the guise, though, that these entities are also trying to stay hidden, why in any way, shape, or form would the Mothman be drawn to these major disasters, which are going to draw local, state, and federal, and military and federal agents? Because after the Silver City Bridge, I keep calling it Silver City, the Silver Bridge collapsed. You have local cops, feds, the National Guard showed up. That's a lot of attention on a particular area.
One of my first thoughts is I'm not sure that these like psychopomp-like creatures are necessarily trying to stay hidden. Like, say, if I compare to like bar guys, black shucks, things like that, they'll often be seen visibly around graveyards in places of tragedy or battlefields and things like that. And it doesn't seem like they're trying to hide their presence in those moments. It almost seems like they're trying to make their presence known for specific moments and then disappearing at other moments. I definitely don't think they're like wanting to be seen in this sort of way where, oh, I'm going to show up on this day and I'm going to wait long enough for the news media to get here. I think that they show up and they want to be seen and known to convey some sort of message, but only for a short period of time. And for some reason, like, they don't want to stick around, to be interviewed.
Now, don't get me wrong. The more that I...
Oh, wait. I know a way to verbalize it.
Sure.
They want to be visible, but still elusive.
Correct.
I think that's a better verbiage for what I'm trying to say.
Now, don't get me wrong. Eventually, where this conversation is going to end up leading, I'm starting to kind of come around to that belief as well. With this idea where they want to be present, convey some sort of message, but not stick around to be talked with about said message.
Yeah.
But I did think it was an interesting point to bring up, because we've always talked about because there have been numerous instances in which we've talked about the paranormal and this theories of that they seem to be not wanting to be publicly known or for like they're not trying to make themselves known to be interacted with on a everyday
their
scale.
Nature is to be elusive.
Right.
I don't know why, but it just seems to be how the game's played.
Right.
And as far as like it being coincidental, I do believe a paranormal event can happen around the same time as a major tragedy and them not be connected. I just don't think that's the case with this one, partially connected to the prophetic phone calls and things like that. And it kind of dies. It doesn't die off immediately afterwards, but it does go from a lot of sightings in a short period of time to a pretty clear drop-off over the next month.
Well, I mean, we've talked a lot about with that time frame where it drops off. We've talked about a lot of entities possibly being feeding off of particular emotions. We've talked about that a lot with shadow people trying to feed off negative emotions. If the Mothman showing up around some of these national tragedies, keep in mind, shortly thereafter, the attitude shifts.
Yeah.
There's a tragedy that occurs, and then sort of the the emotion in the air starts to change.
Yeah.
You know, comparing like right after the Silver City Bridge collapsed, you know, numerous people, you know, died from that particular event, you know, and then after that, there's this sense of the community coming together, rebuilding, going forward. I'm curious if maybe that was what was leading up to it.
Something that I don't think we've talked about recently. The demon connection.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it's like based, but people do have this association that demons turn up on places where bad things have or will happen. Mm-hmm. And then and I think that this is a bit of a tangential connection. It's dark, it's got red eyes, it's got the wings. It kind of fulfills a medieval set. Like if you look at one of those giant paintings of hellscapes done during the medieval period, if you put Mothman in the background there, Mothman wouldn't stand out as a strange entity because Mothman does meet up with this medieval aesthetic they had at the time period of what a demon would look like.
Sure.
Now, I don't personally think we need to draw that comparison, but I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it. What's your thoughts?
About whether or not if it's a demon and it's just drawn to those particular types of events?
Or it's just there because tragedy is evil and it's attracted to evil. I don't personally think tragedy is evil, but I'm trying to make the devil's advocate case here.
Well, I think that if... Okay, well, if I'm going to take that argument about where it's going to show up before a tragedy, also one of the things that's going to happen shortly thereafter the tragedy is, again, going the demon route. Yeah. Okay, if God is going to be the one to intervene and moves us from one plane of existence to the next plane of existence, also within that vein, you see that, you know, demons are avoiding where God is at. So anytime death is going to show up, that's what happens.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, they avoid contact with the divine. Yes,
you're the one with the Catholic lore here.
Yes.
I know bits
where they
and
avoid
pieces.
that. Oh yeah.
Okay, so then that's actually kind of a point in favor for the fall off in sightings. Then,
if God moves us from if you're gonna go the Christian route of God moves us from one plane of existence to the next plane of existence, when we die, why would a demon be there? Because God's gonna show up he's everywhere, especially in that moment.
I guess my thinking,
or why care, I guess,
was maybe along the lines of that. I guess I was thinking it was more of a symbolic statement of God taking you up into heaven than God showing up. It's a way I hadn't thought about it before. But I mean,
no reason,
it does come up. I feel like the conversation is going less in a direction of it being demonic. I hear people bringing up that idea less and less over time.
Sure.
Where do you feel like the conversation on the Mothman is heading?
I think that it's just that he's a prophetic entity. That he's showing up right before something bad is something bad's about to happen.
I don't know. I think the direction is going
or a major event is about to occur.
I think the conversation is heading towards the Mothman is sexy. I've heard it too often lately. Sorry, I always just find it so funny because when we're at the Mothman Museum, there were two different groups of girls walking around talking about how hot Mothman was, and I'm like, what world am I in?
Yeah, it's so weird.
No hating, no kink shaming. If any of you out there are thinking that Mothman is your perfect match, I'm not going to hold you back for nothing.
I'm just going to say if your kink is that you want to be around an individual that shows up right before disasters, you're going to get whatever comes from that. I'm sorry. I'm not shaming you. That's just what's going to probably happen.
Our official statement is it's not a kink shame, but maybe look for less toxic relationships.
Shame is important. Shame is healthy. You shame people from doing dumb stuff like that. I really like serial killers. Yes, shame that person.
Okay.
It's for their betterment. Trust me.
We have two different stances here. I'm taking the no king shame route. You're like
you shamed the American condor for just existing as its natural state.
The California condor can be big and beautiful. Yeah. I never said that it was wrong. I just guessed the weight incorrectly.
I'm going to shame an individual that's going to be whose attraction is going to lead them to possibly a fatal outcome.
I don't know if Mothman's doing the fatal outcome.
We just talked about he shows up in disasters.
Well, so do firemen.
And also, bad luck and the winged humanoid curse
There is a Mothman curse that we haven't talked about yet.
Shame people for their own protection, people.
I guess that does screw up my firemen also arrive at disasters.
You noticed that when we shamed you, by the way, Vic, for your talking about the American Condor, you stopped doing it.
Well, yes, because I was just wrong. I was just factually incorrect.
Yes.
In a very provable sense.
Yes. Well, I'm also going to assume that if you have an attraction to serial killers, there's probably a factual sense of you're probably more likely going to have something bad happen to you.
Do your thing, but maybe like don't actually follow through with it.
What, shaming people attracted to serial killers?
No, hooking up with serial killers.
Oh yeah, don't do that.
Maybe don't actually
do that.
But if you want to explore the idea in your own mind, yeah, sure. No king shaming over here.
There's king shaming over here. I'm not saying I do it a lot, but there are lines.
I say we fight. We
All right, we'll fight. I'm gonna say it's okay to shame people for being attracted to serial killers that'll get them killed. You can defend it. Go for it.
Oh no! I'm just gonna throw a Hadouken.
I feel like you're the heel in this wrestling match. I'm just saying.
Oh, dude, if I was going to be a wrestler, I'd 100% be a heel.
Well,
100%. It seems like it's just more fun.
Absolutely, I'd be the baby face.
Okay, now I really want to get into some of this theory that you pitched me this crazy idea this morning, and I've gone all the way down the rabbit hole with you.
You realize we got 5 minutes left until the pillow talk segment.
Let's go ahead and start it now.
Yeah.
And then we'll just keep going.
And we'll lead, because this is going to be kind of... So one of the things that I discovered with the Mothman, this morning I was, before I reached out to Vic, I was looking at videos of the Silver City collapse. The Silver Bridge collapse. And they got to the part of the documentary where they were talking about the aftermath of the Silver Bridge collapse. And they talked about right after the Silver Bridge collapse, we have this radical change in legislation surrounding the inspection of bridges, which still even exists today, which is also one of the reasons about why you just don't even see bridges collapsing like a lot. They're very heavily inspected. Anybody that's in that can tell you that. And then I realized that when I started thinking about other types of disasters where Mothman has been sighting, there is a bunch of other legislation that shortly follows that particular disaster. And
it even went beyond just the Mothman phenomenon. That's what really blew my mind when you brought this to me this morning.
So, like, if you look at, say, the Chernobyl disaster, there's tons of new international policy that changed that occurred for nuclear safety. Even for the Fukushima disaster. You look at 9/11...
and these are all areas, just to remind the listener, where Mothman was accounted.
There's tons of legislation that's been passed, and when it comes to like safety on airplanes, to this point, even when we talk about the Freiburg Shrieker, back in I think it was like 1978. You look at like Germany in 1980, shortly thereafter, that totally changes the way that they do mining and made it more sustainable to prevent something like that from happening again. And then I was like, it just blew my mind when I noticed this. But then I'm like, might be able to associate that with, we just changed right after a disaster. That just comes from the disaster. But if you look at other paranormal phenomenon where they're height, we passed intensive legislation, generally for the good. Like, if you look at, say, the UFO phenomenon, when it hit its zenith, in the 1960s, clandestine fear of government agencies doing all sorts of weird crap. When did that culminated in the exact same time? What happened in the 1960s? 1966, the Freedom of Information Act is passed to make the government in America a lot more transparent. Bigfoot, I didn't even think about that. If you look at when Bigfoot was at its apex for like the craze was huge for Bigfoot, it's the 1970s. And when do you have the Endangered Species Act passed? 1973. Like, when we really seem to just be in this fervor and involved and thinking about the paranormal with whatever it is, we seem to pass, at least here in the United States, maybe in places around the world, we pass legislation for that, generally for the better. And it's super weird.
Yeah, and this all goes back to the legislation that was passed right after the Silver City Bridge collapse, because there was a lot of fallout from it.
Yeah, from that. And I pitched that to Vic, and I'm like, what does that say? And
maybe it says that we won't make things better without a monster pushing us.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Truthfully, I'm still digesting a lot of this information because it seems like there's a association with cryptids and change. And I'm still digesting that because I just heard that this morning.
Not even cryptids.
Sorry, even aliens, the paranormal, the strange and unusual.
Yeah, like it's this huge overlooking thing. And I think that's one of the legacies that John Keel left was looking at the paranormal from not just a straight like an individualized field, but looking at it as a whole. Because if you just look at the Mothman, it just looks like just something bad happens and we change legislation. But when you compare it to like other fields of the paranormal, you have similar things that happen.
There is a holistic connection within the paranormal. I like to say that there's a meta thread that we're yet to identify that connects it all. We don't talk about it much on the channel because the one time we did, we had a computer blow up.
That's so true. That's so true. We did the top 5 things in the paranormal where it was all connected.
It was so based, it destroyed your computer.
Guys, if there's going to be we're going to get black bagged. This is probably it. So just so you guys know, I think that might be a good time for us to kind of segue into the Pillow Talk segment, so we can
good to me.
Prepare for the Men in Black showing up to get us. So if you liked our probably final episode before we get carted off to some secret government black site, make sure that you guys leave us a like. I guess you could subscribe if it makes you feel better at that point. Leave us a review. Just, I guess that's kind of sort of like an epitaph at this point if you do that. Because we really do appreciate that. And don't forget, keep believing.
Because we'll keep listening.
All right, guys, we're going to slide into the Pillow Talk segment of this podcast. If you want to check out the rest of this awesome podcast, go over to our Patreon and sign up. For as little as $1 a month, you get the rest of these awesome podcasts, as well as bonus episodes we put up exclusively for our patrons. And if you're joining us today, I also just realized by watching myself on camera how big of a neck I have. Like, it is ridiculous. Like, I look like one of those dinosaurs that rams its head into things.
Man, you got to stop looking at yourself on the camera. You're going to get upset. You're going to give yourself a complex.
I already have a complex looking at Jesus. Like,
you are beautiful, you are loved, and you are always welcome to come to the gym with me.
I think I've just discovered my new fighting habit now. If I feel threatened, I'm going to lower my head and just ram it like Homer Simpson into something.
Let's see how that works out for you in day-to-day society.
Like, I don't think I have the Homer Simpson dome head where my skull is thicker than everything else, but I mean, you never know. Like, or I might just give myself traumatic brain injury. I don't know.
Oh, please don't get a TBI.
I'm just saying.